Hey friends, thanks for stopping by. It's Laurie. Let's go make some coastal thrift driftwood DIYs. I'm starting my first project by using a piece of driftwood. It measures about 17 inches long and I picked it up on the beach. Mine already has a hole in just about the perfect spot, so I don't have to drill a hole in it, and if you don't have any driftwood on hand, you can always just use a piece of wood that you picked up outside. For the boat's mast, I'm using a 13-inch stick from one of my pawpaw trees. Those grow really straight, and if you don't have any sticks on hand, you can always use a dowel. For the sails, I'm using this pink curtain. I actually picked it up at Savers. It was in a set, and I think I paid $2.99. My daughter's a teacher, and for Halloween, they all dressed up as Toy Story. She was Little Bo Peep, so I used the other curtain to make her skirt. To get measurements for the sail, I placed the stick inside the hole, and now it becomes my mast. And then I placed the fabric on top of it, making sure that I measured to the end of the boat. I then used my ruler and measured to the top of the mast, and then marked it with my pen. I then measured from the mast to the end of the boat, and I gave myself about an extra 2 inches. From there, I then marked out my fabric, and I cut out my square. I gave myself about an extra 2 inches of length because I'm going to be folding over the edges of the sail to give it a finished look. I'm measuring it 1 inch forward on the upper corner and then marking it diagonally with my pen. Then using my scissors, I'm cutting out on my marked line, and this will create my 2 sails. I wanted to share with you today that I'm participating in a thrift collab with a talented group of crafters. It's being hosted by my friend Liana from Liana DIY, and our guest host is Barbara from Country Lily DIY Decor. I'll have the playlist listed below. Once you've finished with my video, please head on down and check out all these amazing crafters. I want my left sail to be a little bit shorter than my right, so I just placed it against the mast, and then I cut it to size. Although pink would look really pretty on this sailboat, I'm going to use some spray paint and turn them white. I'm hemming my large sail, so I'm starting on the angled side, and I'm folding over the fabric about a ½ inch. Then, using my hot glue gun and my finger protector, I'm adding some hot glue to the fold. I'm folding over the fabric and then pressing it into place with my finger. I continue adding the hot glue and folding over the fabric until I have a nice finished edge. Attaching my sail to the mast, I'm using some jute from the Dollar Tree. I have about a 4-inch tail on each end, and I'm placing the jute about a ½ inch in from the side. I'm then placing a bead of hot glue under the jute and attaching it in place. I'm then adding a line of hot glue on the other side of the jute, and once again, I'm using my finger protector and I'm folding over the edge of the fabric to make a seam. And now that I'm done, my large sail is ready to attach. I'm adding the pole mast to the hole in my driftwood first by using some hot glue. Then, to make it permanent, I'm adding in some E6000. I let it set up overnight, and then to attach the sail, I wrapped the jute around the bottom of the mast and I tied it in a knot in the back. I then added some glue to hold the knot in place. And I wrapped the rest of the jute around the pole. To add the top of my sail, I added some hot glue to the top of the mast, and then I pulled the top of the sail just slightly over, attaching it in place. I then wrapped the rest of the jute around the top of the pole, and I hot glued that in place as well. I'm now taking a short piece of jute and I'm placing it through the open lace on the furthest end of the sail. I turned my sailboat around, I pulled the jute tightly and then I made a little knot. I snipped off the extra jute and then I hot glued the knot in place. To add my smaller sail, I followed the exact same instructions as the larger one, with the only difference being that I had to hem the bottom of the sail because it didn't have a finished edge. I once again tied the jute around the bottom of the mast. I tied a knot in the back and then hot glued it into place. I then cut off the excess jute. I then stretched out my sail. I wrapped the jute around the mast. I made a knot in the jute, in the back, and then I wrapped the rest of the jute around the pole. I then used my glue gun to attach it all in place. To attach the end of the sail, I cut a small hole in the fabric, and then I placed a small piece of jute through the hole and attached both of the pieces on the underside of the sailboat with my glue gun. To make the flags for my sailboat, I'm using some white fabric that I got at Savers for $1.99. I'm folding over one edge and then I'm cutting out some triangles in random sizes. To add a little color to my sailboat, I'm using this pretty fabric that I had on hand, and once again I'm just folding over the edge and then cutting out some random sized triangles. I'm attaching my white flag atop the mast by hot gluing it around a piece of driftwood. When I was done, I then used my hot glue gun and glued it to the back of the mast. To add my row of flags, I'm measuring my jute across the length of the largest sail, and I'm giving myself a little bit of extra on each end. And just like I made the white flag, this time I'm folding my aqua and my white fabric around the piece of jute, and then I'm hot gluing them into place. Once I'm done, adding them to the sailboat is super easy. I wrap the jute around the top part of the mast, and then once again I tie a knot in the back, and then I hot glued it into place. I draped the flags across the front of my sail. I removed the extra jute and then I hot glued it to my driftwood. And with that, my thrifted driftwood sailboat is complete. For my second DIY, I'm using this Dollar Tree sign. I found it at a yard sale for $1 and I buy these all the time. So I noticed that the bow was missing, but I didn't care because I'm actually going to be using the back. I removed both of the hangers, and then using this pretty acrylic paint, I ended up giving my sign a light coat. So now that my sign is dry, I'm going to be hot gluing on some driftwood, and I'm going to attempt to draw a whale freehand, which I am just not an artist at all, but it's going to give me a general idea of where I can start hot gluing on the driftwood. If you follow me, you know I live near the ocean and I'm always picking up driftwood, so I have this collection and I thought this would be a great project to use it on. This is such a fun and easy project to do. I just brought in a box of assorted pieces, and then using my glue gun and following the outline, I'm going to start hot gluing my pieces onto the board. Now, if you're thinking, I don't have any driftwood, so there's no way I can make this project, but there is. All you need to do is go outside and pick up assorted sticks and twigs and bring them in, and they will work just the same way as the driftwood. At Easter time, I ended up making one of the bunnies with the sticks, and after you check out the playlist, if you'd like, come on back and I'll have that linked below so you can see how I made it. I kept hot gluing and adding my pieces of driftwood to the outline, and then before I knew it, I could actually see a whale appearing. When I was done, I added all my driftwood with the exception of one of the tail fins because I'm going to give it a 3D effect once I add on my rope accent. There are two sizes of nautical rope at the Dollar Tree. There's a thicker and a thinner, and I'm going to be using both for this project. I'm using the thinner rope for the top and the bottom, and I'm just knotting one of the ends. I placed it against my sign to get my size. I knotted the other end of the rope, and then I cut off the excess. I then made a second matching rope for the top. Then, using my glue gun, I attached one of my knotted ropes on the bottom and one onto the top. Now that I've attached the two thinner nautical rope accents, I'm going to attach the thicker Dollar Tree nautical rope, one on each side. This time I just measured the rope against the end of the sign, I cut it to size, and I hot glued it into place. Once I had that rope glued into place, I then followed the exact same instructions for the other side. To finish up my whale and give him a bit of a 3D look, I hot glued the last few pieces of his tail so they hung over the edge of the rope. For his fin, I found a piece of driftwood that had a little bend, and so I just hot glued that into place. For my whale's eye, I looked through my jar of buttons and I found this really pretty vintage one that I thought would work perfect. I then used my hot glue gun and attached it in place. To finish up, I used one of the thinner pieces of the Dollar Tree nautical rope and I just hot glued it onto the back as my hanger. And with that, my driftwood whale sign is complete. Thanks again for stopping by and hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed making these thrifted projects. If you're new here and you haven't yet subscribed and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. I will see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.